Chapter 3. Could things be any better? Robin of Locksley declared grandly, elbowing his friend Little John, a bear who was not exactly the diminutive size his name would suggest, as they skipped lazily down the forest dirt path, kicking up dust in their wake. I mean, look at us. Two carefree lads walking through the forest on a beautiful day. No responsibilities whatsoever. The sun is shining. The air is warm. Why, I could practically smell tonight's delicious stew simmering on the fire back at our camp. He grinned widely, showing off bright white teeth. This is the life, my friend. This is the life. It could be worse, Little John agreed, reaching up and grabbing a honeycomb from a nearby bee's nest. The bees swirled anxiously around him as he shoved it in his mouth, but he only swatted them away. Though it could be better, too, like if we weren't wanted men living in fear for our lives and all that. Bah! Robin scoffed, waving him off. I'm not afraid. Not of that sniveling Prince John, anyway. His soldiers might have sharp swords, but they're not especially clever. Not to mention most of them won't even set foot in Sherwood Forest, seeing as it's so haunted and all. He grinned wickedly as he reached up into a nearby tree, smacking a low branch. The tree protested with a loud moan that echoed through the woods, a haunting sound that had scared away many over the years and given the forest its reputation. Very scary, Little John agreed with a smirk, patting John on the head. And you're right, I know, but even you gotta admit, it would be nice to sleep on an actual bed once in a while without being pelted by the rain, he sighed. Guess that's not in the cards for us, though. Robin shook his head. Afraid not, my friend, unless an honest-to-goodness miracle were to occur. I think we're stuck with leaves for pillows for the time being, maybe forever, if Prince John manages to keep his new throne. Bah! The phony King of England, Little John grunted in annoyance. The nerve of him, banishing us from his kingdom like he did, he huffed. Seriously, someone really needs to put that cowardly lion and sneaky serpent back in their places. Well, it won't be me, Robin said with a bitter laugh, for that sort of crime constitutes an axe to the head. And funnily enough, I'm quite fond of my head and the way it's attached to my shoulders. It is indeed a very lovely head, Little John agreed. It would be a shame for you to lose it. He smacked Robin on the back, almost knocking him over. Sometimes the bear didn't know his own strength. And hey, if I have to be an outlaw, he added, well, I'm glad I'm an outlaw with you. You're the best friend a bear could have, Robbie, and you keep us all safe. Robin shrugged modestly. I do my best, Johnny, he said. Out of sight, out of mind, as they say. Words to live by, Little John agreed as they continued down the path. The bear started humming a lively tune, one he'd likely picked up from their minstrel friend, Alan Adale, a rooster who loved to sing and play his lute during their nights by the fire. It was a good life, Robin told himself as he listened to his friend hum out of tune. Not the life he'd planned for, of course, but far better than others were facing in these terrible times. He had friends, he had food, and most important, he had freedom. Not everyone could say that these days, what with Richard gone. At the same time, he still mourned his old life on occasion. Not that he'd ever admit it to Little John, but late at night, when the fire grew low and the songs grew quiet, he remembered the way things had once been. He hadn't always appreciated it when he was young, he supposed, taking for granted his noble status and his fine manor house. No hassles, no responsibilities, no cares in the world. And he had assumed that when they came home from the war, all would go back to the way it was. And if Richard had come home with them, it likely would have. But instead, Richard was gone, and the king's sniveling, self-absorbed brother was still on the throne, pretending like he deserved it. Robin had told Richard from the start it was a bad idea to leave the kingdom to his brother, even temporarily. But the king had reminded him that it wouldn't be for long. How much damage could one do in just a few months? He hadn't counted on the war stretching out for years, and he certainly hadn't counted on dying at the end of it all. Robin felt an ache deep in his heart. He missed his king, his friend. They'd fought side by side for 3 long years in a foreign land. Richard had never treated their relationship as one between king and subject, but as one between equals, always asking Robin's opinion and treating it like it mattered. He had trusted Robin with his life, and now, because of that, Robin thought bitterly he was dead. Creak! Robin stopped short at the sudden sound. His ears pricked at attention. In one fluid movement, he reached behind him, grabbed the bow off his back, and strung an arrow, then aimed it at the source of the noise. Beside him, Little John unsheathed his sword. "Who goes there?" Robin demanded. "Show yourself before I loose this arrow." "Don't shoot! It's just me!" cried a hoarse voice. A moment later, a portly badger dressed in brown robes emerged from the bushes, holding his furry paws in the air. "Friar Tuck!" Robin lowered his bow while John sheathed his sword. The two of them smiled at their friend. Friar Tuck lived and worked just on the outskirts of Sherwood Forest in a small, humble abbey where the animals went to pray. Because of this, Friar Tuck knew just about everything that was going on in the kingdom, and he would bring information to Robin and his friends when he could. They sometimes joked that he was an honorary outlaw. "Sorry, brother," Robin said, patting his friend on the back. "We can't be too careful these days." "Believe me, I know," Friar Tuck agreed huffily. "Why, I feel like I'm risking life and limb every now I leave the abbey, but this time I couldn't stay away, not with news this big." "Big news, eh?" Robin asked, raising an eyebrow. "Let me guess, taxes have risen yet again?" "Bigger. Prince John has issued us all pardons and we're free to go home," Little John tried. "All right, maybe not that big," the friar replied ruefully. "Well then, what is it, brother? Spit it out," Robin urged, quite intrigued. The friar lowered his voice. "Lady Marian is back." "What?" Robin almost dropped his bow. He stared at the badger, eyes wide and heart thumping. "Marian? She's back? Are you sure?" "I'm sure. In fact, I saw her with my very own eyes," the friar informed him proudly. "I was down at the docks retrieving my monthly supplies for the abbey, and there she was, getting into a carriage with the Sheriff of Nottingham." Robin wrinkled his nose at the mention of his least favorite wolf, but his mind remained on Marian. "Well, this is news," he murmured. His memory flashed back to the last day he'd seen her, under the moonlight in the castle garden. He would never forget the way his heart had wrenched as he was forced to walk away from her, leaving her standing forlornly under the apple tree, tears slipping from her big brown eyes. He'd wanted so badly to turn back to her and tell her he couldn't go, that he would refuse his king and refuse the war. But he knew, deep down, she wouldn't want him to do that. Not really, anyway. She wouldn't want him to let down his king, her beloved uncle. And yet, in the end, he'd managed to do just that. "Oh, Marian," he thought miserably, "if only you knew how I failed you." "Robin, are you all right? You look as if you've seen a ghost," Little John teased, poking Robin in the shoulder. The friar chuckled knowingly. He'd watched Robin and Marian grow up together and knew how close they'd been. He probably assumed he was bringing joyous news. Robin shook himself, pushing his troubled thoughts down. After all, what good did it do to dwell on the past? It couldn't change anything in the present. "Oh, don't you two start," he scolded, trying to keep his voice light and teasing. "What happened between Marian and me was a long time ago. Why, she's probably forgotten all about me." Sure, Little John snorted. Just like you've forgotten all about her, right? The bear leaned in, batting his eyes at Robin as if he were a vixen himself. Robin groaned and shoved him away. Well, I suppose there's only one way to find out, Friar Tuck declared. He gave Robin a knowing look. I imagine Lady Marian will attend services at the Abbey on Sunday. Perhaps you would like me to pass along a message to her? Robin scratched his head. It was a tempting offer, to say the least. If he wrote to her, she might decide to write him back. He could find out how she was doing and what she had been doing while she was away. He didn't like having this big, black, years-long gap in his mind where he didn't know what his best friend had been up to. He wanted to know every adventure she'd had, every stumble, every time something had made her laugh, every time something had made her cry. He wanted to know it all. But if he did write to her and she wrote back, what then? What if she asked to see him? What if she wanted to come to his camp? She was still a noble lady, and he a wanted man. He didn't want to get her in trouble, put her in danger for his sake. Also, she would have questions he wasn't ready to answer. He turned back to Friar Tuck. Thank you for the generous offer, he said, but I really don't have anything to say to her. At least, not at present. He felt Little John's eyes on him. He knew if he turned to look at him, he'd find pity swirling in the bear's big black pupils. Little John knew, perhaps more than anyone, how much Robin had missed Marian while they were away at war, how much he still missed her to this very day. But that didn't matter in the end. All that mattered was keeping her safe. He'd failed her uncle. He wasn't about to make the same mistake twice. The friar looked at him suspiciously, but then shrugged. Very well. Just thought I'd ask. I need to get back to the Abbey now, unless there's something else you need? No, Robin shook his head. We're fine. Thank you for bringing us the news. Friar Tuck nodded, then waddled down the path. Robin watched him go until he had turned the corner and was out of sight. It was then that Little John poked him again. What's wrong with you? He demanded. Your lady love is back, and you don't even want to talk to her? Please. Robin forced a dismissive laugh he didn't feel. That was ages ago. We were children. What did we know about love? He turned away from his friend, not wanting his face to betray him. All right, Little John said with a shrug. Have it your way. He put his arms around Robin, leading him along the path. Now come on. Let's get back to the camp. The stew should be almost ready by now, and I'm starving. Robin nodded, and together they headed back in the direction of their secret camp. As they walked, Little John began to hum again, his steps light and almost dancing. Robin, on the other hand, felt as if his legs had been stuffed with lead as he trudged down the path, his mind continuing to torture him with questions about Marian. Has she changed over the years? Did she remember him? Did she still think of him as he thought of her? Because, though the years of war had been long, his feelings for the vixen had never wavered. And now they were all rushing back to him at once, as if wrapped in a raging tidal wave, and he had no idea how to hold them back.